guys, in this tutorial I want to teach you the basics of building a drum beat. In this first video the focus is going to be on kick drums, and then after that we'll take a look at the snares and maybe some hi-hats and percussion. So as you can see, I have a lot of choices of kicks here in my browser on the right side. I'm using the function loops one-shots pack, and I have a lot of options here. So let's check some of them out, and I think you will notice something similar for most of these kicks. So I don't know if you can hear that, but all of these kicks have some sort of pitch in them. They're pitching down a little bit, which is a trick that gets used for a lot of electronic kick drums. It's basically an oscillator with a very fast pitch envelope, and it sounds really cool. It sounds really powerful. You get a sharp attack, and then after that you get that boomy low end, just what you would expect from a kick. So let's drag one of these in and take a look at that through an analyzer. So you can load up any analyzer. I'll use the Pro Q EQ, and we'll play that. And with this one, it's very subtle, but you almost always see it in the low end, where there's a peak that's going towards the left, so from high to low. And I'll take one that has a bit more of it. This one, for example, you should see it a little bit better. So right there is the peak. And we have to be a little bit careful with this, because it sounds powerful, but it also has a lot of frequencies in there that you might not want in there, because it's basically sweeping the whole lower end of the spectrum. So let's start and arrange a little bit of this. And for now I'll just use a 4 to the floor kick drum, because it's typical in this style that I want to make, and it also gives me some sort of reference point. I always know where I'm at in my drum beat. I can kind of use it as my metronome. So to do that, we'll just place this on every quarter note, so we get 4 kick drums for each bar. So now let's first clean up this kick a little bit. So as we can see, we have a lot of action here, and if we want to hear exactly what's going on there, we can use a high cut and we can listen just to the low end. And this is very useful for monitor purposes. Some people would, if you have a sub, you can just put on the sub and disable your speakers, so you can focus on the low end a little bit better. So we can see that we have 2 spikes here. We have one right here, and another one a bit lower there. So the low one, I want that. I think that's really cool. But for the higher one, I want to take that out, because that is where I want my bass to live later on. So at this point I should already start thinking about what I want to do with the other instrumentation. And I definitely know that I want some sort of bass synth in there. So I'm going to clean up this area a little bit to make space for that. And this is often the area that you don't really need for kick drums. You want to focus on the highs and on the very lows, but here in the middle we can often lose a little bit of the sound. And you can hear that it doesn't sound worse, not to my ears at least. It just sounds a little bit cleaner, and that's what it is. It is a little bit cleaner, and we have some more room for other instrumentation. And then we can focus on that click part. This one has quite an aggressive click or attack already, but normally that attack lives somewhere in this area. This area is very sensitive to our ear, so anything that you do here is going to be more obvious than in the other frequency bands. So let's try and find where that attack actually is. So I can hear a lot of it right here. And if you cannot hear anything with the EQ, or you hear just small changes, just try boosting it a crazy amount, like 7 dB or something, and then you can very clearly hear what's going on, and then after that you can just drop the gain down, and you know you're at the right place. And I do the same for compression, where I overdo the effect so I can hear what's going on, and then I reduce the effect later. So in our case, this click is already quite severe, so I want to take that down actually, where normally I would boost this. And I can mess with my Q control, the bandwidth, to work on exactly the area that I want. And I'm even gonna take out some more highs to make this a little bit of a warmer kind of sound. It's gonna sound a little bit further away because we reduced those highs. So that was the before. And this is the after, and we can boost that fundamental frequency a little bit. And if we watch that peak closely, we can see that it's around 60 hertz, I would say. And with all sounds in the world, it's gonna have some sort of pitch to it, and these kicks as well, especially the fundamental. If it's 60 hertz, it's gonna be close to a B tone or B flat maybe, and that's gonna conflict if you write your song in C, because the C root is around 65 hertz. And these small differences, which are kick being in B and the rest of the song in C, it's not gonna sound very good. It's also gonna give you more of a messy mix. So we have to be a bit careful with that. And sometimes it's difficult to find out what that pitch actually is. And for pitch in a kick drum, I'm more talking about the frequency of the strongest tone in there. And the strongest tone is often the low end. So what I have is I have something set up in my notes here in Logic. This is in my template, and I can see for every note what frequency it has. So if we go to around 60 hertz, where our peak was, we can see that a B1 would be 61 and a C2 would be 65. So a B would actually be okay in our case. And now let's see if the Logic picture, it's under metering tuner, if it can recognize anything of that. So Logic thinks it's a G, which would be more closely to 50 hertz. Okay. Now, here's the interesting thing. We can pitch this without using a sampler or anything like that. Let's say we want it to be another tone. I don't know which one yet, but I just want it to be another tone. So the way audio works also in general is the playback speed is linked to pitch. If you play something back really fast, it's gonna sound higher. If you play it back slower, it's gonna sound lower. That's why if you listen to vinyl, for example, and you set it to the wrong tempo, your record will sound very low in pitch. So in Logic, we can use the stretch tool to stretch this audio. And you can find the stretch tool right here. And then we can set it to speed. You can do the same thing in Ableton with the warp mode, I think it's called. So now we can drag this out, and I'll mute all the other ones for a second. And you can already hear that it sounds a little bit lower or higher. And that's because we're shifting that fundamental. So if we take a look at that, you can see right now it's there. If I drag it lower, it's going to be lower again. This is an important concept that you should use to your advantage when building kicks. It means you can correct your kicks a little bit if they're sounding off. So I'm gonna choose which one I like better. There's this. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go for the cleaner one, so a little bit higher one. But I just wanted to show you that that little trick. Now for the compression part, there's actually a few things we can do to improve this. I'll choose a, I'll go with another FEP filter compressor. I just really like that stuff, and it's very visual, which I also like. So this kick, as you can hear, it has kind of a cool, strong attack, and after that it gets a little bit messy or sloppy, which is a cool sound, but it's not necessarily what we want. If we look at the waveform, we can see that sort of messiness. So here we have our click, and then there's probably the low thump, and then there's some other stuff happening there. So the first and cleanest thing you can do is just decrease the length of all these kicks. And then this is going to give you a click at the end because you're aggressively cutting in the audio. So we can give everything a little bit of a fade out, and then mess with the curve on that to shape the kick exactly how we want it. And this can have a very big effect on the overall sound of your track. You can make it short and snappy like this with a aggressive fade or curve. So now it's almost just a click, and then, for example, for a more bass heavy section of your music, you can make them a little bit longer. And now you get more of that bass thump at the end. So this is almost like manual compression, but for the real compression, we have a few controls that are common to all compressors. The first is the threshold, and this is where the compressor starts acting. And you should just think of a compressor as a giant volume control. You tell it when to start with the threshold, and then you tell it how aggressive it should be. You tell with the attack how fast it's gonna act, and with your release when it's gonna stop acting. And then finally with the gain, you say, well, this is how much you're gonna do. So first we need to say when it's going to act. And the threshold means that everything, you see that line there moving down, everything that is above that line is, the compressor is paying attention to that. So you set that line first, and you need to set this because it depends on the input level. So let's try it here and see how many dBs are we going over the threshold. Well, quite a lot. We can see it right here in the gain reduction meter, which is the middle meter right here. We can see that we almost go 10 dB over the compression. So let's take that down a little bit. I usually go around maybe 2 or 3, depending on how much you want to do. Let's go a little bit more aggressive for this. Something like that. So there you can also see that it's reducing those peaks. You can see the peak itself, and then you can see the red line, which is the gain. You can see that it's pulling that down, or the gain reduction, I should say. So now if we set the, let's set the ratio to a 4:1 ratio, which has to do with how aggressively it's gonna work. I'll revisit this later and I'll explain this a little bit better. For now, let's look at the more basic controls. The attack, it tells us when it's gonna start, or how fast it's gonna start rather. If we set this very slow, you can see that red line, the gain reduction, it has a longer fade in. It takes longer to act. And as you can see, the effect of that is also that now the gain reduction is less, because it has less time to react on those peaks, and therefore it's going to reduce it less. So let's set this a bit faster. Usually for a kick drum, I'll go to around here. And here's a common mistake that people make. They'll say, I want a very aggressive kick drum sound, so I'm going for a fast attack on my compressor, and that does sound good if you say it like that. But actually, that's gonna mean that you're making your kick less aggressive, because you're just pushing down the transient, and the kick has no room to breathe, and it sort of dies in there. We can hear what the effect sounds like if I go for a crazy threshold and the attack all the way down. That's what's left of your kick. There's almost no low end. And if I set the release very long, it's gonna make it even more extreme. So So let's not go that route. Let's give the attack some time there, so that the compressor doesn't listen to the attack too much. Something like that, and then we set the release. And for release, the shorter the release, the less amount the compressor is gonna have, because it's gonna stop after the release stage. So it's basically the inverted thing from the attack. I'll usually, for kick drums, go around something like this. Depends on the tempo of your music, of course, as well. And then we're losing gain, so we need to make up that gain again. And you can hear that our kick is a bit more aggressive than before. We have to be careful here though, because we're also adding volume in a lot of cases, and volume can be very deceiving. It can let you to believe that you have actually made something way more powerful, while in fact you've just made it louder. So to make sure I'm not fooling myself, I can click my output meter here, or my gain, and then I play the dry kick, and then I see it's at minus 6.1, and then with the compressor it's at minus 4.4. So now I can decrease the gain again and make sure it's at the same point as where it was before, so at minus 6.1. So right there, so now we actually have an equal comparison. And you can hear it still sounds a little bit more powerful. Those are basic tricks to get a good and solid and clean kick drum. We haven't talked a lot about the samples that you are choosing, which can be difficult. It always was difficult for me when I was starting out. I never knew what was a good sample and what was a bad sample. But with these tricks you can get pretty much, well, not all of them, but you can get a lot of kicks and make them sound good. Just pay attention for the low end, make sure it has some low end in there. Clean up the mids of the sample. In a lot of cases that's just a messy area. And watch for the attack, but don't listen too much for the middle of the sound. So if I'm scrolling through kick drums, I'm trying to listen to the low. This one has quite a lot of low, and to the highs. And these are nice too, but they're a little bit too distorted for my taste. This one is nice, but it has some hi-hat kind of sound on the right side of the speaker. I really like that one actually, but that is the kind of stuff I listen for, and then I take a look at it through my analyzer. I watch where the frequencies are, I watch how loud it is, and I can clean it up in this way. Generally I try to go for a little bit more of a cleaner sound, so less distorted, for example, so then later I can add some distortion and give it some more flavor.